All right, I'm going to call the March 28, 2017 Board of Directors meeting for the MDX to order. I'd like to initially begin by welcoming Commissioner Vice Chair Audrey Edmondson to our board today. And Commissioner, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today. Ms. Secretary, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Board?
Present.
Commissioner Edmondson? Here. Mayor Jimenez? Ms. Gutierrez? Here. Mr. Meyer?
Present.
Mr. Vasquez? Here. Mr. Walters? Ms. Weinberg? Secretary Wolf?
Here.
Vice Chair Fano? Here. Chair Martinez?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Prior to the moving approval of the agenda, I'd like to make a couple of amendments to it. Number one, I'd like to make an action item 9B, the evaluation of the Executive Director, Javier Rodriguez, as well as the recommendation from the Executive Committee for his performance and for his salary. Any objection to that? Thank you. I'd also ask to take chairman's privilege to, after the presentation of the plaque presentation, I'd like to have a short part of my chairman's comments there, and I will finish with some other comments as well. Any objection to that as well? Hearing none. Making those two adjustments to the agenda, Mr. Director, is there any other adjustments we need to make?
No, sir.
All right, then I'm asking for the approval of the agenda, moved by Ms. Gutierrez, seconded by Ms. Weinsberg. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Council, please.
Yes, declaration of voting conflicts. Do any members of the board have any conflicts with any items on the agenda?
None.
Seeing none, we move forward.
Citizens' comments, Council. As I've always indicated, I welcome any citizen comments relating to anything to involve MDX or transportation. If there are no comments, we move on. Plaque presentation, please, Mr. Director.
I'm trying to see if there's any of the recipients here.
Well, there are two.
Mr. Chair, as is customary, we recognize our board members for service. There is one more board member who's on his way up in a few minutes, and we'll recognize him. But the two board members that we'd like to recognize, and I'll start with ladies first, Luz Weinberg, for her exemplary leadership and commitment to support the MDX mission and vision. Thank you for your invaluable expertise and your participation. Luz has been a board member since 2013. Her term expires in April 6th, next week. And I thank you dearly for your service.
Oh my God. Yes, sure.
And to my namesake, Javier Vasquez, who was appointed in 2014. And Javi's been involved in many committees at MDX. He's also demonstrated a tremendous commitment to this agency as a volunteer, to the mission and vision of the agency. And I want to thank you dearly for your friendship and for the council, because I call you and ask questions, and you're always there. So thank you very much, Javi. And Mr. Chair, if you'd like, we can continue with the agenda, and as others show up, we can recognize them accordingly. And then we'll take a group picture at the end.
Sure, we can move forward with that. I know that Mr. Vasquez has a limited schedule today, so we may need to take the pictures a little earlier than expected. No problem. Very good. Well, I asked to make some comments early on today because there's legislation that has been brought to in front of our legislative body in Tallahassee that I believe creates a concern that we need to have an evaluation from staff about. Specifically, we had a tremendous and strong intergovernmental meeting last week discussing some of the legislation that has been brought. One that included having a 3% across-the-board reduction of our toll amount, as well as dedicating 20% of our excess revenues to assisting the Miami-Dade County in transportation issues. After we had that meeting on Tuesday, there were 2 amendments to that legislation that came forth that rise to a need for an evaluation to be done by our staff on how it affects MDX. We've had legislation that has been done in the past that has been administrative. The reason we are losing board members Vasquez and Weinberg was not because they were replaced, but because the board has been reduced. That is something that is within the purview of the legislation, as in all aspects of what MDX is about. The amendments that were brought forth last week, one calls for a 25% reduction in the toll that we are currently having our clients pay, as well as allowing, I believe, gantries to be placed at different exits. Is that correct, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, the amendment that was filed by the same, in the Senate committee was that the limit of where we can put new gantries was 5 miles. The amendment was that that excludes ramps, so we can put gantries on ramps.
After hearing and learning about this information, I am concerned about how and what effects to our clients, to the community, if such amendments are included in the legislation would affect the ability for MDX to satisfy our financial requirements and our never-ending desire to work with our partners here in Miami-Dade County to improve transportation. Mr. Director, I'm asking that by the next board meeting, I have a PowerPoint presentation prepared describing how a 3% and a 3%, a 10%, and up to a 25% reduction in our toll revenues would affect the ability for us to satisfy our financial requirements, projects that would be affected by them, the locations and the districts where these projects would be, and what communities would be affected by these projects if this legislation is passed, so that the community is fully aware of what this would what ramifications it would have for all of us. And I think that would be something that would be beneficial to all of us to have, so that we can determine whether or not how this affects us and what it will affect, because not only are we board members, but we're also members of this community. My kids go to school here, and I'm hoping my kids grow up here. This could have a ramification of that, and I believe it's essential that we have as much of that information as possible. Mr. Director, do you believe you can have that done for me by the next board meetings?
You're giving me a direction, but
Yes.
our bond counsel, our financial advisor, our CFO, and the rest of the staff is here listening, so yes. And if it could be done sooner, I will do it sooner and bring it to your attention. And even if I have to email it, send it out, or have a conference call, or set up a special meeting.
I'd also like, between now and the next board meeting, that you take time to brief each and every one of our board members, so that if they have any questions, they will be informed and they can come to that board meeting with any other information that they wish to relay. I think it's important that we provide all of us with as transparent as humanly possible, and that we provide to our clients what the ramifications of such legislation how it affects us and where it would affect us. Not just in a small scheme, but what projects will be affected by such type of legislation. I'd also like to also ask, a year ago, Director, we did a board outing, for lack of a better word, where we went out and looked on the construction and the improvements that were going on 836. It was about this time of the year. It's not that warm yet, and I'd like you to arrange another opportunity to see where we are in the construction of project on 836. I would ask that you schedule that with the rest, make sure the time is convenient for all of our board members. I would welcome the new members to join in reviewing the projects that we're doing on 836. And that way we could see the progress that is being made on the projects that MDX is responsible for. If you could also arrange that for us as well.
We will do that, and I was always also asked to include as part of that tour a tour that would take us along the proposed alignment of the southwest extension of 836 out west that is in the project development phase. So we would do not only the tour of the ongoing construction, but try to go out and see where an extension would go, where the impacts would be, what the communities are saying, and what the solutions are. So we'll also take a tour of that southwest extension.
Great. And I gotta tell you, for someone who doesn't do construction, it was amazing to see how much has been done when you're out there with your hard hat on and looking to be part of that. But I think these things are important, to see the results of our work, as well as where we're moving on behalf of the citizens. So I'd like those things done. Does any member of the board have any comments or any disagreements with my suggestions? Because we are a team here. Hearing none, I'd like to move forward with what I suggested, okay? Excellent, thank you for that. Moving on, item 2, please, council.
Approval of summary minutes. Board meeting of February 28, 2017.
Moved by Board Member Gutierrez, seconded by Mr. Meyer. Discussion, open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, discussion is closed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing any opposition? Hearing none. Before we move forward, Mr. Geller, I know, I recognize Representative Joe Geller, who is here today. We have already passed citizens' comments, but since you are here, as a courtesy to you, if you allow me to finish these next 3 reports before we get to the action item, I'll allow you to have a moment to have a citizen's comment, if that's acceptable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very kind.
Very good, thank you. Executive Director's Report.
Mr. Chairman and board members, I'm going to waive my report and replace it with a presentation. At the last board meeting, a request was made by Board Member Jimenez, Mayor Jimenez, on the future of transportation here in Miami. And I've asked Juan Toledo and our staff to put a presentation together. Many of you board members have seen parts of this presentation. I think what we've done is we've wrapped it up to paint a picture of what transportation here in Miami could look like as we progress. So I'll let Juan go through the presentation, and then we can go through question and answer.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, board members. As Director Rodriguez stated, last month, Mayor Jimenez requested that we come back and provide a snapshot, a glimpse of the future of transportation and MDX's role in it. Before I do that, I wanted to kind of set it up a little bit. When the existing network of transportation was set up or planned, it was done so for a third of today's population. And that's not counting for your inter-county commuters, as well as over 15 million visitors that we see here on a yearly basis. So the issue today is that we are having a hard time keeping up with demand. Our roadways are congested, and to add worse to the matters is that the challenges that we have with funding, all of the needs in the county are continuing to grow and grow. So what do we do about this? Well, we need to figure out a way to use our infrastructure better, more efficiently. We need to look at new solutions. We need to think outside the box. And we definitely need to look at partnerships, both public and private. The mission of MDX has always been to enhance mobility in Miami-Dade County. And we've done that through the years. We've made the improvements necessary when we took over the roadways 20 years ago. In 2007, our visioning results focused on connectivity, technology, and transit. And we implemented that by connecting 836 to the west with the extension project. We started the implementation of all our technology across the system, ITS, DMS, everything that ties into the existing Sunguide Center, and we use that to disseminate information back to our commuters. And transit, the incorporation of buses on the shoulder began 10 years ago when we signed the agreement with Miami-Dade Transit, and we started running buses along 874 and 878. And now with the adoption of the MDX Strategic Master Plan, we're looking at other solutions, multimodal solutions, intermodal hubs, and continue to expand on the technology. So transit is a solution that we need to continue to adopt and support, because it is excellent in connecting the dense population, the employment centers, the education centers, and the residential centers of the county. But it also has And it's required because you have riders that are dependent on it. But the challenges with transit is that it's high cost to build, operate, and maintain. You don't see enough revenues for it because, as you know, nationwide, transit is heavily subsidized, and there's limited flexibility with what you build. Metro rail is only good for metro rail. Trains are only good for trains, and so forth. So you have limited uses and limited route services that you can provide with the infrastructure that you do with transit. So maybe we need to look at, should we be redefining what transit is? Or could we even do that? You know, transit today is the conveyance of people on public transit. But should public sector have sole purview over transit? What if we bring in the public sector and let them try to provide demand-driven solutions? Let them figure out how to better provide route flexibility, schedule flexibility. And I'm not saying to replace public transit, but it's an alternate to public transit. I think you need to have both. Roadways are a solution. User fees usually tend to cover costs of the roadways, operations and maintenance via gas tax or tolls, and et cetera. But roadways are flexible. Roadways adapt to whatever mode you want to put on it, be it cars, buses, ride sharing, whatever the modality, the roadways are ready to accept it. The challenges with the roadway is that you don't have enough capacity for the current demand. And the issue with that is that how do you define demand? It's not just now morning peak and afternoon peak, it's all day peak because everybody tends to be doing the same thing at the same time. Everybody goes to work at the same time, everybody's taking their kids to school at the same time, and now everybody's recreating at the same time. So you have demand is there every day at every time. And if you ask people to change their routines, well, there's a social cost to that too. So that's something that it's difficult to tell people now. You know, don't go to the park at 4, go at 5. Can't do that. So managing congestion in Miami-Dade County has been a real challenge. So what is MDX's role in transportation solutions? Well, we provide the flexible infrastructure to adapt to any of the platforms that we've been talking about: bus rapid transit, express buses, technology, ride sharing. It's all there. We focused on efficiency. We're making the operational and capacity improvements necessary to meet the demands moving forward, but that's not enough. You can't continue to build your way out of congestion. So we're looking at other ways to move people through different modes: transit lanes, technology lanes, ride sharing. A total mobility solution, again, building off of what we've already done from 2007, the policies that this board has taken on since 2007, 2016, and so forth. Continue with connectivity, the expansion of 836 southwest, the expansion of 924 to the west and to the east. Expand on technology, express transit, technology lanes, connected vehicles, and then reshifting some of our focus to the multimodal hub concept and bringing in the public and private sector opportunities, because with multimodal hubs, not only are you connecting the system to the areas where you can draw people to, but you're also promoting economic development around those areas. So I provided, and can you bring the map? So I provided this little glimpse, and I've also added, did you hand out the, oh, it's in the, okay, so in your folders, you should have the map of the SMART plan. But what I wanted to show here is that you need an integrated system between the MDX roadways, the SMART plan, and as you can see on this drawing, we're illustrating the current SMART plan with the 6 proposed corridors. We're showing the existing MDX system with the proposed projects. We're showing all the existing routes, transit lines that exist in Miami-Dade County. And we're also showing some of the hubs that we've been proposing to illustrate how you have to have an integrated approach. You know, we keep hearing that MDX needs to get on board with the SMART plan, but by way of this illustration, we've been on the SMART plan. For the last decade, we've been planning alongside Miami-Dade County to make sure that we provide all the necessary options and to bring a comprehensive, cohesive, and balanced approach to transportation. But all of that will not make any sense if you don't also bring an integrated corridor management approach to the system. It's not just the county working in an envelope or in a vacuum, or MDX working in a vacuum. We all got to work together. MDX managing its expressways alongside DOT with theirs, the county, and Miami-Dade Transit with their buses, an advanced integrated management approach to be able to bring our commuters, our commerce, reliable travel times whenever anything's happening anywhere in the system. And it's not just one roadway, it's the entire community. So again, technology, promoting technology and making sure that we're talking to each other. And again, building on that, our infrastructure needs to be ready for the future. Vehicle to infrastructure communication, vehicle to vehicle communication. Look, we're not gonna dictate the mode, we're not gonna tell you, we're not gonna implement the mode that's gonna go on, but we need to be ready for it. The amount of information that we can gather as a collective system and share that information back to our users is only gonna make congestion better moving forward, and we can bring those options to fruition. So having said that, I found a little quote that I wanted to present and wrap up with. The future is not something, it's not some place we are going, but one we are creating. The paths to it are not found, but made. And the activity of making these changes, the activity of making them change both the maker and the destination. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Rodriguez and open up for discussion.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Juan, and to kind of like put it in perspective, I get asked a lot of questions in a lot of conferences and by a lot of folks. Predict to me when there's going to be enough penetration of technology, of autonomous connected vehicles, that it will change the way that we commute and cities move. And if I knew that, I would probably not be here. I'd probably be somewhere sitting, playing the stock market. But it's inevitable, because my answer is this: it's already happened. The question is not if it's going to happen, because it is going to happen. The question is how quickly it's going to happen. So as a public agency, as someone who has to oversee public expenditure of funds, the guidance that we've given to the board and implemented is, let's prepare ourselves for these changes. Let's make sure that we're not making investments that are wasteful. Let's make sure that we're not widening or eliminating communities in the spirit of adding a lane or two when it's not necessary, because in the future, things might be completely different. We set aside a shoulder. We set aside a hard shoulder on 836, on 874, and 878. We're going to be doing it on State Road 112 and the Gratigny. We want to interconnect all of those with the managed lane network that the state of Florida is working north and south. Is this a viable platform to bridge from where we are today to where we want to go? Is this a viable platform for the novelty, at the beginning, eventually becoming a lane where the regular automobile goes on and the technology automobiles go on the general purpose because of that transition? So the point of this presentation, the point of this to make it to the board, and I know a lot of board members have seen this in the past, was to basically say, look, we have to have a balanced, connected, cohesive plan moving forward. You can't do one without doing the other. If we do not connect Gratigny, then Gratigny doesn't have the maximum use. If we don't figure out a way to extend 836 and create an outer beltway, just like the Turnpike created the heft 30, 40 years ago, and it changed Miami-Dade County, well, that's where we're at today. But do it smart. Do we have to put 5 lanes across? No, we don't have to put 5 lanes across. But buy the right-of-way necessary to put a transit facility, transit stop. Figure out where you can get those hubs. We make investments, not only at MDX, but I know at the Florida DOT in Miami-Dade County, for local circulators. Well, those local circulators might be able to use these platforms, these main corridors, to go from one city to another, or from one city to an airport or a seaport, rather than just circulating within its community and then having someone have to drive the long distance. So that's the thought process. We don't have all the answers, board members, but we're trying to create an environment where folks want to use our facilities. As a member of IBTTA and as president of IBTTA, I always said that we're not in the transportation business, we're always in the mobility business. And actually my theme was the business of mobility. And the point of it is that people are going to be less concerned with, and I know that a former boss of mine will be very upset when I say this, are going to be less concerned with how many horsepower their vehicle has. They're going to be more concerned how many gadgets and widgets it has so they can be productive as they're commuting from one place to another. that is the future of transportation. And with that, I close for the board.
All right, anyone have any questions for Mr. Rodriguez? Hearing none, we're moving on. The next matter is general counsel. However, Mr. Director, I have seen that past board members Vincent Brown and Mayor Maurice Ferre are both here too, so I'd like to recognize them as well right now. If I can, if we can have their plaques as well. And upon the completion of this recognition, we'll take the photographs.
Mr. Chair, board members, I want to recognize Vincent Brown. Although I knew Vince for a short time, even though I actually knew him longer because of an actual project, you know, one of the things that stood out with Vince is that he was very intuitive, especially in the conversation we just had today. I'll never forget, he pulled me aside one day and said, if we don't handle what's coming in the future, if we don't figure out a way to incorporate technology into our facilities, we have missed completely what our mission is as MDX. And I thank you for your service at MDX. We have a plaque for you, so thank you, Vince. And thank you for the next person that I'd like to recognize is someone I hold very dear to my heart. I mean, I've known Maurice Ferre for 25 years. I remember working on the East-West Corridor when he was the vice chair of the county commission, and he was always the one that didn't allow us at DOT to settle with what was acceptable. He always wanted to push the envelope. You know, Maurice has been was a board member from 2005 to this year. He served as chairman, and he served in various capacities. And he was one of the reasons I came to MDX, and I thank Maurice, and I know the board has recognized you in the past, but we wanted to recognize you for your service at MDX.
I gotta switch sides then.
Say a few words.
Sure. Okay, go right ahead.
I'll say it from the.
Sure. Would you like your plaque? Mr. Mayor, of course, I'll ask for a couple moments to speak. I will welcome any of the other past board members to make a comment if they wish as well. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my friends at MDX. In 2 weeks, my third great-grandson will be born. The scientists, and this is a consensus opinion, not only at Harvard and Stanford and all the great medical centers, say that that boy, God willing, will live to be 115 years old. That's technology. Now, if my father had lived to 115, he'd be standing next to me now, because he would be 115 now. When they asked Henry Ford what would have happened if his idea of building an automobile at Dearborn, Michigan had been put to a vote, what would have been the result? He said, Henry Ford answered, well, we would have had faster horses, because that's how people saw it. So when Henry Ford went to see Tom Edison in 1903, Edison understood. He said, go do it. It took him 5 years to start his factory. It started in 2008. By 2013, every coach factory but one went broke in Michigan. In 5 years. that one merged with General Motors and became was Fisher, who merged with General Motors. I have no idea as to how quick things are going to change. Jeff Bezos this morning said, I'm just getting started. And yesterday, Elon Musk started a new company that will connect the brain to a computer. What? Well, you know why? Because the work's half done. He knows he's not going to miss. And so my parting words to you at MDX is, listen, I was honored to lead your Blue Committee. And I know it's controversial, but really believe me, that vote to increase those tolls is the best thing we've ever done. And time will prove that. And the strategic plan that we just concluded after 5 years, that's a meaningful development, which I hope this community recognizes. But you ain't seen nothing yet. And in the next 20 months, I will do more for MDX than I've done in the last 12 years from Tallahassee. And believe me that you're going to see some very, very interesting things happen in the next 20 months in transportation. And I still serve on the Florida Transportation Commission, and believe me, I'm looking out for Miami-Dade County and looking out for MDX in particular. Good luck and thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor to serve with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Chairman, Mr. Mayor, about your great-grandson and all the experts at MIT and Stanford, you know that every single one of those experts missed the mark, so I think your grandson will probably live to be 150, not 115, and you're right on in terms of what the future brings and how quickly the future will be upon us. Many people probably in this room don't see it yet. I know that you do. Okay, and so I want to thank you for your vision. Always been a visionary. You've always been a visionary, and this community owes you a debt.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I leave MDX with a real happy glow because I know it's in good hands. I mean, we couldn't have a better executive than Javier Rodriguez and his team, all of his team. And I don't think we could have a better board, so I know we're going to be doing well.
Mr. Mayor, before you leave, I'd like to have all the board members step to the front with those award recipients so we can take a photo of all of us together, please. Thank you. And Mr. Geller, as soon as we're done with that, I'll allow you to have your moment.
I didn't want to pull the cord. Don't rip the cord, man. Yeah, exactly.
They'll make you pay for it if you do.
As I indicated earlier, Representative Geller, I will allow you, under citizens' comments, you're allowed 3 minutes to speak on any matter relating to MDX. I will give you your 3 minutes to make your public comments. Thank you for your appearance. Thank you for being here today, sir. I know you're a very busy man with session hall, and I thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the courtesy. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, Madam Commissioner, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Executive Director, and various members of the board. I'm here today as a shareholder for a proposer of yours on behalf of Greenspoon Martyr, PA, and we are a proposer in RFQ 1704. And I'm in the unenviable position of asking you not only not to follow the recommendation of your technical committee, but to make what could be a difficult decision. My firm was ranked second behind somebody that is apparently an incumbent, DeLeon & DeLeon, and I understand from having reviewed it that they have rendered very good service to this board over a number of years. The lead attorney, Kirk DeLeon, is certainly somebody that I'm not here to question in any way. His credentials are obviously impeccable, and it's certainly not an easy thing to be seeking to have you vote in a way contrary to a technical committee, particularly in view of the fact that the 3 of the references that were submitted by that firm are also members of the selection committee. So that's an uphill struggle, and I recognize that. I am here, though, just to say a word about my firm. And with all deference to the other firms that have submitted, we believe that we could provide excellent service to MDX, and we're here to ask you to take that into consideration. My own experience has been over 20 years serving as counsel to different cities. I've represented as their principal attorney during that time more than 5 different cities as their principal counsel, including currently still serving as the attorney for the village of El Portal, but having served North Bay Village, Golden Beach, Opelika, Miami Lakes, and served as special counsel for a number of others. I've practiced for over 35 years. And in addition, our firm, and I think this is the main difference I would point out, obviously you are getting very good service, but this includes litigation. And again, with complete deference to the excellent job that apparently DeLeon & DeLeon has done, they're a 3-attorney firm with a couple of outside counsel. In addition, we're approximately 200 attorneys, literally with dozens of litigators, as well as people who are expert in all aspects of government. As I said, I've been involved in procurement for close to 25 years, probably a little longer. We think that we can do some things to help take the outside representation of MDX to the next level. We think we provide an unparalleled and deep level of service. And certainly we think you would not only give nothing away by going with us, but we think we can do a lot to assist MDX in fulfilling its mission to the citizens of Dade County. So with that said, and again, with thanks for your courtesy, Mr. Chair, I do have additional copies of our submission. If there's any board member who'd like to see one, I'd be happy to pass these around. If they're not available, I'll hand them to staff in case anyone does want to see one. Sure. And again, I'm here only to say to you that we think we have the depth, the commitment. My personal commitment is to being available at all times to this board, to the general counsel, to the executive director. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we believe we can do this job and do it exceptionally well. And we ask you to consider voting in favor of Greenspoon Martyr to be chosen to handle the procurement silo and related litigation. Thank Thank you very much for the courtesy, sir.
Mr. Representative Gell, thank you. Moving on our agenda. Council, I know we have a shade meeting. I would like to move that to the end of the meeting, or do we, if that's acceptable to you?
Yes, we will do it after item B. But administratively, I just have to ask Mayor Jimenez if he has any conflicts with any items on the agenda.
No, I don't.
Very good. Mr. Executive Director, we do not have an MPO representative. Do you have anything to report?
The only thing I would like to say is that this month, the MPO, which is now the TPO, the Transportation Planning Organization, celebrated its 40 years. It was an excellent meeting. It was held at the Brickell City Center, and it was an excellent example of transit-oriented development. So we look forward to continuing to work with the TPO, and I have to get used to saying TPO, but that's the only report for this month.
And let's make sure that when we prepare our agenda for our next board meeting, it says TPO. The TPO. Excellent. Treasurer's report. Mr. Board, or?
Mr. Borg is on the phone.
Okay. Ms. Schaefer, please.
Mr. Borg, did you want to comment? Maybe you can. Mr. Borg had asked us to put a brief presentation together, if I may.
Marie,
Yes.
Marie, I was talking and the phone was in mute, so I was not getting through. So sorry for interrupting you. I would like to thank everybody and let you know that this is my first trustee meeting, and if there are any comments or any things that we can improve, I look forward to receiving them. The first thing that I did was to meet with Marie and go through the financial statements. In that, we have been observing that our toll revenues, the net toll revenues, have a variance that surprises the staff. And as we started to dig into that, we found out that there are some technology issues in our collections that staff will now relate in detail. And I challenged Marie to try to remediate those losses of revenues with potentially some internal reductions of our operational expenses. And to my great surprise, they have come up with a report that mitigate a portion of the variances that we are going through. And as Marie will conclude, I think that in the end, our numbers will hold as projected and as budgeted. And with that, I will let Marie fill in the details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. As the treasurer indicated, he asked us to put a brief presentation together. After my presentation, Steve Andrew, Director of Toll Operations, will also give you an update on the operational side and some of the impacts that we faced this year. So this is February's report. I guess we have a little bit of echo effect here. This is February's report for the 8-month period, and as you can see, toll revenue is about $4.5 million below the forecast. Overall revenue is still down $4.6 million. On the expense side, a little bit more positive news. We're about $1.8 million above the forecast. So the net effect to our net revenue is $2.8 million. That's still 2% below what we anticipated. The treasurer had asked us to come up with the forecast for the remaining part of the year. So toll revenues is about $146 million, which is made up about 120 of SunPass and another 23 of toll-by-plate, net toll-by-plate customers. So we're reflecting a negative 4.5, which is 3% below the budget just for the toll revenue. This is mainly due to some variances and some issues with toll operations, and Steve is going to go through that. But we looked at what's happening for the month of March and where are we trending. So for financial statement purposes, we took, I would say, a cautiously optimistic perspective on how the rest of the year is going to play out. So the toll revenue of 4.5 negative, we think by the end of June, we should be somewhere about a negative 1.7. So how do we make up the 1.7? The treasurer asked us to look at expenses, and we saw that we could attribute about 2.5 to expense savings and reductions of different tasks that we were working on. Investment income is going to trend about $1.5 million above the budget. It's non-controllable. Interest rates have gone up. We think that trend is going to continue, obviously. And the fee income is related to late fees for customers for toll by plate that don't pay their invoices on time. They get charged $5 for every time they pay late. That's trending about $1.6 million above the budget as well. So on the expense side, how did we come up with the $2.5 million expense? Toll operations is going to attribute about $1.1 million of that. That was just because of the fact that the vendor had a late start for this fiscal year. We had some G&A expenses, about almost $45,000. IT initiatives and general consulting, mainly that is due to, they were upper limiting amounts, and there was some negotiation on hours that were positive to the agency, so we had savings in that area. And then professional services, we paid for some professional services through the cost of issuance when we did the refunding back in September. The contingency was $1 million when we approved the budget back in May of 2016, and the $1 million was a high number. It was probably the first time we had a contingency that was $1 million. But the reason the board set it at $1 million, as you recall, was for litigation, and there were some particular initiatives for public communications as well as IT that we're supposed to be undertaking. We think that we're only going to spend about $150 of that $1 million. So that's how we got to the $2.5 million. And I would note that the budget for fiscal year 17 was flat compared to the prior year, fiscal year 16. It was less than 1% of an increase. So coming up with $2.5 million wasn't necessarily an easy task, because we did have a flat budget year over year. So for the forecast, on column A is the budget. We showed a $240 million overall revenue, tolls, fees, investment income, and then the expense is about $59 million. Column B is the treasurer's report for the 8-month period for February. And then column C through F, which is March, April, May, and June, we took a conservative approach on the toll revenue based upon what we see today. Today is March 28th. We know what the revenue looks like for tolls. So it's positive. Things are turning around. So just to take a very cautiously perspective on it, we think that we'd be down about 1.7. But if you take a look at the overall revenue, it should be a little bit less than $900,000 as a negative. But the expense is more than to make enough for that, and we're about $1.5 million above the approved budget. So what does that all mean? The net revenues would be at 1.5 above the budget that we passed. The debt service was 96.4 when we passed the budget, but because we did the refunding, we had a savings about $946,000. So senior coverage ratio is actually going to perform much better. Instead of a 1.87 coverage, it's going to be a 1.91 coverage. So all in all, I think it's positive news. We'll continue to report during the board meeting at Budget and Finance the results of the toll traffic and revenue. And I believe Steve has some statements about some operational things that they're doing to make sure that we're on track.
Mr. Chairman, board members.
Yes, Steve.
As Marie stated, we have turned the corner, and we did run into some technical issues during the transition of our toll-by-plate system that we had in beginning in July. For instance, the toll-by-plate is broken up into two ways that we do our images. One is an automated process that actually didn't get up and running until July 12th. That runs about 60 to 70% of our transactions. I'm pleased to say that to date we are doing yesterday's transactions, so we are up to date. The backlog as far as getting those through to SunPass is at 700,000 a day. So we're sending records of 700,000 and getting those back to us on a daily basis. We should run through that. Probably the expectation is through the end of next month at 700,000. That's where the revenue's coming in. The second side was standing up the manual review. Manual review takes the rest of those 60 to 70% that are automated, and they have to be looked at by a human being. We transitioned to a new team that was part of the Pride Enterprise through the state statute that allowed us to save significant money. And by doing so, it took them longer than expected to stand it up. A lot of red tape, Department of Justice approving all the sites. We started out with 2, which was a hindrance. We're now running at 7, so we're fully loaded. We're running about 2 days in 1 day. So every day we catch up a day. The expectation is by the end of the year, the fiscal year, we would have completed all of our transactions, and all of that loss actually is gained. So it really wasn't like we lost revenue, it's just we haven't realized it yet. The thing to note is that the true gap is that in our image review process of what we've done to emphasize technology and to make it better than it was and to reduce our error rates, so we're not sending out a letter to somebody that says, well, that's not me. We have super reviewers. These are individuals that look at an image that's been deteriorated so bad because the state has gone to the 10-year license plate, so it's very hard to read. Also out-of-state information, these people know these plates like the back of their hand. So they're experienced, and we had to train them and get up to speed. The great thing is we'll keep these people for quite a while, unlike our other contract where they had a 40% turnover. So all in all, it's looking brighter every day, and as Marie pointed out, in March, so far, the numbers are proving itself.
I don't know if the treasurer has any comments, and he's still on the line.
Mr. Board, do you have any comments, sir? I'll give him a moment.
No, I'm eager to hear any comments from the rest of the board.
Does anyone from the board have any questions? Mr. Mayor.
Yes, what is the required debt service coverage?
The trust indenture is 1.2, the board policy is 1.5, and our financing plan is about 1.8, 1.85.
You're required 1.2?
The bond indenture is 1.2, the board policy is 1.5, and we built a financing plan that is about 1.80 and above.
And why'd you do that?
Which one?
Why did you go, the board policy is 1.5, and why do you do it 1.85?
The 1.5 was primarily just to stay in an A category at the time. We did that policy back in 2012. The 1.8 was the benchmarks and some of the goals the board had set out to make sure that we had 30% for pay-as-you-go rather than doing 100% financing on projects. So that's where the 1.8 coverage came in. Some years will be 1.8 coverage, some years 1.85, and maybe you'll below the 1.8 coverage on certain years. But the thought process was not to finance 100% of the projects, particularly some of the projects that are unfunded right now. Some of those projects are large construction costs.
So your coverage right now is, and your revenue right now, you're looking at paying as you go for future projects?
No, none of the projects will be 100% pay-as-you-go. You know, we have net debt service is about, right now, about $96 million. Next year it'll be 99, and every year it escalates. And what we ended up doing on the debt service was we wrapped the debt service around the cash flow. Whatever the system, the excess after you pay your debt service will go for the required reserves, and then the remaining portion will go to pay for projects, a portion of the projects. But some of the projects are 500 million, 600 million, so none of those projects will be 100% financed, so we could be able to afford all of them and set the tolls at a rate that it's going to pay for its own debt service.
You're saying your debt service is escalating?
Yes.
Are you issuing new debt, or how is your debt structure set up that is escalating? The
way it's done in transportation is usually when a project goes online, it takes a number of years to actually ramp up, so to speak. So the cash flow in year one is not necessarily there year two. So we phase in the principal. We don't back end the principal, but we phase in the principal to match the revenue stream. Now, keep in mind...
So you capitalize interest?
We capitalize interest. We've done that for a number of years. We don't do 5-year capitalized interest, but, that's a very expensive proposition to capitalize interest.
Right.
As well as, if you back end debt, that's a very expensive as well. So what you end up doing is shrinking your capacity because you're paying all interest almost. You're doing a mortgage almost interest by doing a lot of that.
What's your high point, and when do you get there?
I think it's 2024, 25, I think it is. And I think the high point right now is 123 million, 125 million, somewhere around that range.
Okay. And when you get to that 123, where do you expect your coverage rate will be?
The coverage will be about 1.9 and above. What we ended up doing is we created a pocket. So the debt service actually goes up, and then it dips down, and then it goes back up on the latter end of the debt service scale. And we did that intentionally. We did that to match where we knew projects were in the PD&E stage, at what point we need to layer in additional debt and basically pay for those projects. Now, bear in mind what happens to the funding of these projects is we have to pay for the projects before they actually give us the revenue. So it's sort of a timing issue that we need the construction money to build the projects, and then it takes 3 or 5 years to build the project. And what happens under our indenture, which I think our indenture is a little bit more restrictive than most. When they put it together, I get the thought, they really didn't give a thought process to it. But revenue cannot be recognized for the financial model 3 years out. So if I borrow money in 2027, and that's a 4-year project, I cannot recognize the revenue because it has to come online 3 years from the time I issued debt. And that's sort of a kind of a timing issue as to when we build the model, how do we make sure we factor in the revenue to pay for that project, but we may not be able to recognize the revenue for that project because it's not part, the indenture precludes us to do that.
So you always carry cash into the project?
We have to, and that's really kind of the difficulty of it. The way the indenture is built, the way the projects need to be timed.
So you are building in some future projects into your debt structure, or into our revenue and debt structure?
We have on the overall model, but for like the next 5 years, the model is pretty much committed to the current capital program.
Okay, if I could just get, if I can get a sheet on your debt structure and how it escalates, and also your assumptions on revenue, I'd like to see that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions?
Yes,
Yes,
if
Mr.
I
Ryan.
may, that sheet that the mayor asked for, if that could be distributed to the board, I'd like to see that as well.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Ms. Schaefer, let's make sure all the board members get a copy of that sheet.
Yes, sir.
Hearing no other questions, moving on. Mr. Director, we can do the committee reports encompass into the general agenda. That's fine. Consent agenda, council, please.
Consent agenda, I'll read them both together. Travel approval, May 4th to May 5th, 2017, trip to Orlando, Florida by MDX board members and Executive Director Rodriguez to attend the Team Florida quarterly meeting. 2 is April 21st to 22nd, 2017, trip to Jersey City, New Jersey by Executive Director Rodriguez to attend the IBTTA Board of Director meetings.
Anyone wish to move the item? Moved by.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gutierrez, seconded by Mayor Jimenez. Open for discussion. Hearing no discussion. Anyone have any objection to these? They both pass unanimously. Regular agenda, item A, please, council.
Yeah, Fran do it because I was on the tech committee.
Apologize.
Item A, MDX procurement contract number RFQ 17-04 for legal service support. Approval of the recommendation of the Technical Evaluation Committee to select the #1 ranked proposer for each of the areas of expertise. I'm going to turn this over to Helen.
Well, let's first move the item. Item being moved by Vice Chair Fano, seconded by Mr. Meyer. The item is now open for discussion. Go ahead, Helen.
Thank you, sir. MDX released a request for qualifications seeking proposals from qualified firms to provide legal services in the area of expertise of eminent domain, public procurement contracts, and bond disclosure and financial services. Each firm was limited to submit a proposal for only one area of expertise for which they wish to be considered. On January 13th, we received 9 proposals, 2 for eminent domain from Broad & Cassell and Weiser, Helfman, Cold, and Bierman. For public procurement and contracts, Arnstein & Layer, De Leon & De Leon, Greenspoon Matter, and Schutz & Bowen. And for bond and disclosure and financials, Brian Miller Olive, Greenberg Trowick in association with Edwards & Feeney, and Squire Patton Box in association with D. Seaton and Associates. We performed compliance review of the proposals. The majority of the proposals contain minor irregularities that were cured pursuant to our procurement policy in the solicitation documents. However, the proposal submitted by Schutz & Bowen was deemed non-responsive by the Policy and Planning Committee, as they actually represent various plaintiffs against MDX, and that was the pre-qualification criteria that they did not meet. The Technical Evaluation Committee met and evaluated the remainder of the teams, and the recommendation is that to select the #1 ranked firms. Under eminent domain, the #1 ranked firm is Weiser, Helfman. Under public procurement and contract is De Leon & De Leon. And for bond and disclosure and financial services, Squire Patton with Seaton and Associates. Pursuant to the approval of this committee, the contract term will be for 3 years with the option to renew, the contract terms will be for 3 years with the option to renew for 2 additional years, subject to contract performance evaluation of excellence. Staff will negotiate hourly rates with each of the firms. However, there is an hourly cap for shareholders and partners of $375 and for associates of $300. In addition, each contract would include an upper limiting amount. For the eminent domain, it would be $1.5 million. For public procurement and contracts, it would be $500,000. And for bond and disclosure and financial, it would be $2 million. All of this upper limiting amount exclude any litigation that each of these firms may be assigned to participate on. Any questions?
All right. Any questions from the board? Ms. Gutierrez?
How are the fees determined? Is there a fee structure?
The fees?
Did they supply it with the bid, or is this something
No,
that
that
is
will be
negotiated?
negotiated with each individual firm, but within the hourly caps that were pre-established in the RFQ. And work is assigned on an as-needed basis through task authorization. In addition, each of the scope, even though each of the scopes are specific to the area of expertise, they also have leverage so that we can assign additional work on other areas if needed. So we can use any one of the firms as we need it, depending on the expertise or resources or preference of the agency.
Any other questions? Mr. Board, do you have any questions on the phone, sir? Hearing no questions, discussion is closed. All in favor of following staff's recommendation, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously.
Item B, Executive Director Performance Evaluation.
Carol, could you please, First, I'd like to ask the item to be moved by a board member. Moved by Ms. Fano, seconded by Ms. Weinsberg. Item is open for discussion. What we're doing, ladies and gentlemen, is today we had the evaluation of the performance evaluation of our executive director. That was done by the executive committee, which is all of the chairmen and the officers of the MDX board. After the completion of the executive committee, we wanted to bring the recommendations to the board today for your determination and acceptance of it. Carol, if you could go over what was discussed and what was the criteria that was done and what were the results of today's executive committee in reference to Director Javier Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you. The executive committee met earlier this afternoon. We used the following criteria to perform the evaluations. The first was a scoring matrix that measures general leadership qualities and other competencies for the executive director. The next was sorry, wasn't expecting this.
That's okay.
Was the performance measures that were reported by the FTC for the fiscal year of 2016. The evaluation was, or the members agreed to a 100% scoring on the performance measures and recommended the maximum increase according to the contract, which is a 6.5%. It was decided that rather than make that an increase to the base salary, that Mr. Rodriguez would take that merit award as a bonus in the amount of $17,875.
And that is relevant. Why, Carol, if you could go into how that in fact, how Mr. Rodriguez, based on that suggestion, is actually leaving some money on the table?
Well, two reasons really. Part of it is the being a public agency and being cognizant of how salaries are looked at by our customers and by the public in general. And the second has to do with the, what do you call it?
pension.
Thank you.
That's okay, Carol.
Exactly, with the pension, which a bonus would not affect the FRS.
Thank you. It's important to note that this is the second year in a row that Mr. Rodriguez has requested that his contractually allowed increase be only a bonus and not be included as part of his base salary. So he's actually benefiting MDX by not having that increase in his salary. And that's something that he's done in the past as the executive director as well. Some of the stats that came out in the summary performance that I thought were very important and I wanted to mention was the minority participation during this year involving MDX and small businesses here. The objective was 90% of accomplishment. We reached 146%, which means our goal was always to have 10% of our contracts go to small businesses or minority businesses. We reached 14.6% of our contracts went to small local businesses and minority businesses. And that's a direct result, I think, of this board and of our executive director working hard to make sure of that. So I thought that was an important stat that we should bring out. Does anyone have any questions for Carol on this issue? Does anyone have any comments about about executive director? Yes, Commissioner Edmondson, of course.
You stated that the goal for small and minority businesses were set at 14%?
No. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Helen.
Helen.
Thank you. Actually, it's a small business requirement that our policy requires that 10% of our service contracts be committed to small businesses. We're actually meeting in excess of 30%.
We exceeded the goals.
We exceeded.
Mm-hmm.
I may have misspoke. I apologize, but that's what I'm trying to point. Any other questions? Hearing that discussion is closed, all in favor?
I have
Of
a
course.
question. What's the base salary?
The base salary is $275,000.
Any other questions? Hearing that discussion is closed, all in favor of supporting the executive recommendation in reference to executive director's evaluation and merit increase, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please note Mayor Jimenez in opposition. Now,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's in no way a disrespect of the executive director. I have the highest regard for the executive director. But I can't, in my agency, we just got a 4% increase for the first time in 5 years. And so if you would have lowered that bonus to a 4%, I could have supported it.
Understood, sir. Moving on. We're at informational items, so what I would like to do here is, I know.
Okay.
Before we get to
Sorry,
the shade
Chair.
meeting, I know, Ms. Weinberg, you had some comments you wanted to make before we go into the shade meeting, if you have any comments to make.
Mr. Chair, I just, I guess, wanted to say my farewells and my thank yous. I have been sitting on this chair, always at the end of the board, given my last name, for the last 4 years. And while it wasn't my intention to join MDX, as most of you know, I actually made a bid for the Public Service Commission, a grueling process through Senate committees, et cetera, and made it all the way to the governor. And while he chose the incumbent, a very capable woman who was on her way to become the president of the National Public Utilities Commission, which Florida had never had a precedent. I was very excited about that. But I did get a call and was asked to do this instead. And of course, as most of the public tends to when they hear of a tolling agency, I first was apprehensive. While I certainly, as a very fiscally responsible Republican, appreciate the work that tolls put into our communities, I think it's nowhere more evident than here in Miami-Dade County. And that is someone that can actually say that. I have not only traveled the world, as a lot of people like to say, I'm only missing Africa in terms of continents, but that's coming up soon. I've also driven the roadways, and I specifically and purposefully driven the tolled roadways of France, Italy, Ireland, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Israel, even Hong Kong, if you have the audacity to drive there. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that nowhere have I seen the dollars get put right back into those roadways than right here at home in Miami-Dade County. And I'm always very proud to come right back home here and drive our roadways in Miami-Dade County, the roadways that are governed by Miami-Dade Expressway Authority. So it's been a really outstanding, beyond words, honor to serve here. And we have met a lot of challenges and adversities and bad comments and a lot of lies and falsehoods about our agency over the course of those 4 years. And having come from the city of Aventura, where I served for 9.5 years, 2 terms, everyone knows Aventura by the mall. I know it as my city, my home for the last 17 years, where we still enjoy the lowest tax rate in the Tri-County area at 1.72 because we're so fiscally responsible, fiscally sound. That's where I came from. So I came into this board with lots of apprehensions, not only because it's tolling and everybody thinks it's a bad word. I wear my toll pin very proudly next to my flag pin. I was quickly appeased and assuaged not only by an outstanding executive director. I see him as a city manager, and we happen to have the best one in Aventura. But I saw Javier as a true leader and a mentor, and he is joined by incredible staff, Christine Juan, Steve, Helen, Marie, Carlos. It's just a really good group. So I was quickly spoiled again, because I tell everybody I'm a spoiled elected official, former elected now, and I'll be a former appointed, because of the great work we did in Aventura. And as you know, I also sat on the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO board, for 6 years as their vice president. So I have colleagues from all over the United States who often came to me because of how well we did things, and many of them who traveled to my city to see. So my standards were very high for where I put my public service, and I was certainly not disappointed here on this board. And Javier, I don't believe there are even enough words that any elected official or appointed official or member of the public can say about you and the work that you do and your passion for this agency, clearly evident. I've been in Tallahassee. Each of these 4 years I've been serving here, trying to defeat or talk sense into some of the folks that have come after us unnecessarily. I leave this board very proud of the work I did, but also very sad because I'm leaving the board because of some of that legislation. I would have gladly stayed on. And frankly, I think that piece of that legislation accomplished nothing. A 13-member board will work just as well as a 9-member board. We were more proof than that. But sometimes doing the right thing and being responsible with your customers' money can bite you in the ass. And unfortunately, I did curse.
This is public.
But I did work for a French company, so that was part of my French. So I want to thank each of the board members for your patience with me. I often had a lot of confusing questions, especially early on with Marie. But I was very happy to see how well we worked. And I want to thank you, Javier, from the bottom of my heart. You've been an incredible friend and mentor. Louis, you've really taken the lead as a great chair. I love what you have done with the media. It was well overdue. The public needs to understand that what we do here is good work, period. And I challenge any public agency in any part of this country and the state to tell us that they're better than us, than this agency, of where we put your toll dollars immediately back into your roadway. I'm an Aventura girl, so I take I-95 Express. I always joke with Gus Pego when we were at the tunnel that I call it the stress lane, and I honestly did not see my express dollars going right back into that 8-mile stretch. But I know that when you ride the Miami-Dade Expressway roadways, you see your dollars right there. I do also want to thank, because we're all volunteers, I do this out of the goodness of my heart, and after I got over the shock of the governor asking me to go to bat for tolling, I I'm very proud of where I invest my time, and I'm very proud to be here. But you can't do that as a hardworking professional, mother of 3 big kids, without people that let you play around. And my boss from the Port Miami Tunnel Project, Joe Folco, is right in the audience, still supporting me. If it was them back in 2013 who said, sure, whatever time you need. And then we went to build Brickell City Center, and for a year I did both those huge projects, managing communications and still trying to sit here, and I was still on the City of Aventura Commission. So thank you for your patience and my time being away. And of course, my husband's also here in the audience who let me stay up nights reading documents. This isn't easy work, but I loved every minute of it. And I hope that I did the agency and the board a good service. And I am available, of course, from here on forever. And like Maurice said, I loved what he said. I'll probably not do more for MDX than I had in the past and in the next few weeks. That goes for me as well. I'm here as needed as always, and I will forever be a champion for toll for Miami-Dade County Expressway Authority because it really works and it is good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Besides your passion and your desire to be an active community leader, we're going to miss some of your colorful statements. Thank you for your service, and we look forward to you continuously being a leader in this community, and I look forward to seeing how you continue to become part of the future. And thank you for your hard work and your service throughout. Thank you again. Now we can do the shade meeting, please.
Yeah.
Okay. It is 5:20. The time is now 5:20. We are about to have an attorney/client session in accordance with Florida Statute 286.011 regarding the litigation styled Miami-Dade Expressway Authority versus K&B Investment Corporation, case number 16-028799 CA 24 in the 11th Judicial Circuit in and for Miami-Dade County, Florida. This session is estimated to last between 30 and 45 minutes, and the following people will be in attendance at this meeting. Myself and the board members that are present, Vice Chair Shelley Fano, Ms. Maritza Gutierrez, Mr. Arthur Meyer, Mr. Cliff Walters, Ms. Luz Weinberg, Secretary James Wolf, Mayor Carlos Jimenez, and Commissioner Audrey Edmondson. Mr. Board, will he be able to participate via the telephone, Council?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then Mr. Board will participate via telephone. MDX.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, MDX attorneys, Mitchell Bernstein, MDX General Counsel Carlos Zalvadar, and Associate General Counsel Francine Steelman, and Executive Director Javier Rodriguez. These proceedings will be recorded by a certified court reporter, and at the conclusion of all litigation discussed, the transcripts will be made part of the public record. All those individuals who I have named should leave this room and reconvene in the conference room adjoining these chambers. So we will start the shade meeting in exactly 5 minutes. I will now reopen the public meeting. The attorney-client session has now terminated, and members of the general public are now invited to return to the meeting. There's no one here. There is somebody here. Good to see you, sir. Move to adjourn? Moved. Adjourn meeting. Thank you.